What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. Today we're going to make some important and very useful refinements to this neck carving jig that I made a while back. This one's fun. We're even going to get somewhat of a finished neck here. Stick around, check it out. If you've seen the video that I recently did for the guitar neck routing jig, you'll kind of have an idea of where we're going to be going with today's project. If you haven't seen that video, there's a link in the video description. Go check it out. That way all of this is going to make sense. Now, I mentioned in that video that there was a lot of upgrades that I wanted to do to this. I've got them all right here. These are all 3D printed parts. Got a whole bunch of them that we're going to get installed on this jig. We're going to test them out and see what kind of improvements we can make to this thing. Now, I have spent a lot of time over the last month and a half learning how to model things in 3D modeling software. I've taken classes, I've spent hours and hours practicing and trying different things just to get a little bit proficient. There's still a lot more that I need to learn, but I've been able to create a pile of parts that are going to go on this jig. So let's get them installed and try this thing out. Now, the very first thing we're going to install are going to be these brackets that are going to address one of the issues that I had when I first put this together. If you've seen the video, you'll remember I was trying to use some springs, but I couldn't find any locally, so I just temporarily put some nails in here and used some bungee cords. While I still haven't been able to find some springs, I have come up with what I think is going to be a pretty decent way to connect those bungee cords, at least a little better than these nails. And since these brackets are basically right off the 3D printer, I had to print these with some support material. I need to remove that. A pair of pliers just kind of snaps that right off. And then it leaves just a couple little burrs here that we can quickly clean up with a piece of sandpaper. Now, these brackets already have the screw holes and everything in there. They're going to get attached right up here on the top. It's going to give me a nice spot to loop the elastic band over, again, until I can find some sort of screws, or who knows, maybe the elastics will work just fine and I'll keep it that way. But for now, that's going to work really good. Now we need to address the issue of not being able to stop the router from going too far. I want some sort of a stop on here so that I can't route down into the headstock or into the heel of the neck, but I want it to be adjustable depending on what I might be working on. I want to be able to change that. I don't want to just put some nails or screw some blocks in there. I think I've got just the solution. I've made these little brackets that fit right over here, and then we have some knobs which we'll be able to thread into these holes. That way we can slide them back and forth, lock it down. All we need to do is install some carriage bolts into these knobs. I've got the little square recess modeled in there. I've also modeled the threads into this piece, but for some reason the threads didn't come out so well, so we got to fix that. I'm just going to run a 1/4-20 tap down through the hole to clean up the threads. Then we can insert our carriage head bolt and just tap it down to seat the square portion into the recess of the knob. Nice and snug. Bam. They fit a little bit snug, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm not going to be moving them all that much anyway. And there's the last one. There, that takes care of that. Now I can adjust these once we get a guitar neck in there. I've got one more thing I want to do to this frame before we move on to the carriage. I've created these cool Haley Guitars little emblems. We're going to put them on either side, but we're not just going to screw them on. I've also created a matching router template to fit this little emblem. Now we can just attach this to the side of the box, route this profile, and basically inlay this in the side. I think it's going to be cool. What a cool use for a 3D printer. Custom router templates in basically any shape you want. And now I'll just use a template bit in my router and route that shape out. Well, that made a mess. The fit on this is so good, I probably don't even need to install these screws, but I did build the screw holes into the model, so I don't really want any empty screw holes sitting there, so I'm gonna add the screws anyway. That looks cool. So now we'll set the frame aside and we can turn our attention to the carriage. Now, if you remember in the original video, I said I was really excited to come up with some custom cams that I can swap out, and that's kind of the way I assembled this the way I did. Well, I have designed a set of cams that we've been able to 3D print. Now, this one is based heavily on a Fender Modern C profile. If this works though, we're gonna be able to make a whole bunch of different ones to mix and match, get custom profiles. The sky's gonna be the limit. Now, I've used all of the same dimensions for these existing cams when I made these, the same thickness, the same sizes, the same hole locations, but the profile is customizable. Let's install them. Threads in. That means my holes are in the right spot. Same thing goes for the other side. So one thing I've done on these cams is I've modeled the same profile on either side. Now, one side is for a neck that does not have a fretboard. The other side, if I install it that way, the profile's bumped up by 1/4 of an inch. That way, if I have an unprofiled fretboard on there, I can still use this jig whether I have a fretboard or not. All depends on where I want to use it in the process of building a neck. So I think that's gonna be kind of cool. The reason I wanted to design it with both profiles on the cam is because typically, at least right now, my process of shaping the neck usually happens after the fretboard's installed. And I'm thinking by having both on there, I'll still have that option if I want to take advantage of it. I think now it's time to test this thing out. I've got the same neck that I used originally in here. It's not completed yet for the profile. A lot of you guys were somewhat disappointed that I didn't complete a neck in the first video, and honestly there was a reason for that, is because I was planning on these upgrades. I wanted to get the jig together so that I knew where I needed to make some changes, and after getting it together, now I know what I needed to do. So now is hopefully where we have good results and we get a finished and completed neck profile. I've run into a little snag that I need to fix really quick. On the end of my cam, I've got this locking screw. Well, that sticks out just a little bit farther than it did on the wooden cam. I don't know if there's somewhat of a thickness difference here, but I need to model in some sort of a recess or something in here and reprint these cams. I'll do that really quick. Well, I've got the new cams printing, and this little clearance issue was really just an oversight on my part, just a mistake I made. I did not take into account that the screw was going to stick out too far. Really, it wasn't a hard fix. The biggest issue is time. It does take several hours, like I said, to print these, so we're just going to hang tight, wait for the new ones to be ready to go. I'm not going in depth anywhere on 3D printing. That is not what this video is intended to be. It's really just to showcase how I'm making some changes and modifications to this neck jig, and really making custom cams. That is what I had in mind for this jig from the very beginning. I just had to get a 3D printer, learn how to make these cams and all of that sort of thing, but it's just another step in growing and learning here around the shop. I hope you guys take a lot of time to do that as well. Learn new things, try new things. It's fun to experiment and grow your skill set. So we'll slap these new cams on as soon as they're done. So I've got my new cams all printed out. These are exactly like the other cams. I just added a recess on there so that the locking screw can be down in the cam, give me a little bit more clearance when we put this together. And here you can see the recesses which allow the screw to sit down inside the cam. Gives me a lot more clearance. Now the first time around, I used a spiral straight cutting bit in my router and it had a square profile on the top. This time I'm still going to use a straight cutting bit, but this has a ball nose on there. I'm hoping that the ball nose gives me a little bit cleaner finish. It didn't work out super clean using a squared off profile because at some point of the rotation you get the square end of the bit digging into your piece, and I just feel like it didn't leave as nice a surface. Hopefully this ball nose works a little cleaner. We interrupt this regularly scheduled video with an update from the future. Now you guys haven't seen me carve the neck yet, but I just want to say that overall I wasn't super happy with the particular finish of this ball nose bit. So I want to reach out to you guys, those of you that have some experience maybe with a jig like this or with some CNC machining. What kind of bits would you use for this type of application where the bit is sitting straight and the piece of wood is rotating? Kind of like a 3-axis mill sort of thing. I don't know what bit to use, honestly. I think the straight bit that I used originally gave me a little bit better finish than this ball nose bit. It's still usable, just gonna take a little bit more sanding. Let me know down in the comments. We now return to the regularly scheduled video. We'll just readjust the stops so the router can't go too far. After setting the depth on the router, we're ready to crank this thing up and make some sawdust. Now one thing that I think I'm going to do in the future that I should have done this time, and that's making multiple passes with the router, working your way down to the correct depth. Right here I'm trying to do it all in one pass, but now that I know better, I'm going to do it in multiple passes in the future. Learn from my mistakes. Well, right away, the finish isn't perfect. I probably need to make another pass over that, but profile-wise, it looks a lot more like a neck having these cams on here. Now this again was the same neck that I did the original test with when I built the jig. I think I'm gonna dig out another scrap neck and let's do one more from scratch with an unshaped neck, something that's not already started. This operation really creates a ton of dust. I think another improvement that I might do later down the line is model a dust port into one of those Haley Guitars emblems on the side. That way I could connect a shop vac maybe to the back side that you can see here. That might help collect some of the dust and chips. Just an idea. All right. Well, that is a lot better. Has a lot more of a guitar neck profile than what we started with just those plywood cams. This is gonna work out really well. I can tell just by looking that we're thicker down here at the heel area than we are up here at the headstock, and that's exactly the way we should be. There should be a taper going this way as well as down toward the headstock. All that's really needed now is some final sanding, maybe a little bit of carving with some rasps and files just to fine tune everything. But overall, we're a lot quicker. It saved us a ton of time. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't seen the first video where I built this thing originally, links down below in the description, as well as some other links you might want to check out. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time. So let's get them installed and try this thing out after we drink coffee. You guys will probably notice also in here, it's a little different behind me, huh? I've also been working on cleaning things up and around the shop. What do you think? Leave it down in the comments. Let me know. Is it an improvement? Got rid of those bins that have been up there forever. I've been meaning to do that for like 2 years. Finally done. One thing I've done on these cams is I've got throwing them around.